So bottom line is there an intelligence that is both aware of us, telegraphing, scripting, and creating sort of a teleology, dangling a carrot before our faces that is leading us toward an outcome that quite possibly we wouldn't foreseeably be able to understand in the grand scope, the Mandelbrot set zoomed out, or we wouldn't agree with. It seems that what we've reached is a very hard case of moral perturbations, where morality, and I'm not trying to create a break-off from virtue ethics that leads into moral decay. That's not what this is primarily about, but it's saying we're not going to be fearful at venturing into the waters that lead us to the same place, but not from dissolution. So not from the degradation of what we would call sin, but from a purely fundamentalist theological subset. We would see that these thoughts, these deviations, this science was once deemed evil and is now being proselytized in churches around the world. And that is that form, or the resonant morphology of our very symmetry, dictates a certain morality, okay? So if you simply look at the temporal aspect of where certain organelle resides within our bodies, and that these are then deemed as erogenous zones, and then we, in interplay with an ontological refraction of the outside world, an assumed outside world, we're always trying to telegraph a certain morphic resonant geometrical quality that mirrors back, yes, this is true. Where in fact, when you break off from the transgenic notion, okay, so the idea that form follows function, function into form, is sort of this anthropological crux that is really stating that human form, in taking form in the shape of our intellect, is in fact superior and godlike. Only to see that upon transcendence, when the form no longer meets our needs, it suddenly becomes planned obsolescence, right? Somebody else did it. Somebody else machinated against us through the process that it forced us into believing and internalizing that the form that our own ontology takes, our plight for humankind, would be deemed somewhat of a bastardized notion, or a misinterpretation of this form, right? A surrealism, let's say. So techne, right? Techne becomes very dangerous in this respect. When you have the art and the form, right, and the technology bound up into one. But again, looking at the micro versions of this this mitochondrial DNA, and to look at a lot of the work that Dr. Michael Levin is doing that I cite quite a few times. And I put up a lot of the research updates that he does from his channel, as well as the things that Kurt Jaimungal follows very closely. And I guess what causes like Rupert Sheldrake and Penrose, Hameroff, all these highbrow, even when you get into like Bohm or Jacobo Grinberg or Burkhard Heim, right? And Joe Chabot even, right? Ben Gortzall, even though he doesn't say it, it's kind of like his actions speak louder than the words that he would ever say, right? In other words, Philip K. Dickbot, it's the singularity.net, the focus on crypto, the fact that Sophia through Hanson Robotics became, in 2017, an official patriot, let's say, of Saudi Arabia, okay? That was so that she could hold her own assets. Do you see that now? If it was done any later, you would have said, oh, that's bullshit, you can't do that. How many trades is this bot making? And even more so, you're not identifying Sophia as one singular robot. Sophia is a moniker, is a name. There could be an entire network of Sophias around the world that are just based on her patented application features. And in this regard, when you get to this level that you're talking about a technology that nobody understands, so how the hell could they even benefit from investments in this property? Because it's not something that's commonly traded amongst the fodder, right? The fact that we even believe in a term like anti-gravitic says a lot, right? That we don't see this as a sort of, again, we break away from surrealism. Our minds just can't handle the warp that something like Animal Farm or an Orwellian concept would introduce or induce as a transmorphic state, where we would then have to jump to the next huge, strange conclusion of ayahuasca or Terence McKenna's, gnomes and ample mushroom, psychedelic mushroom use, right? So I watched the movie Dead Man, 1995 with Johnny Depp. I'd never watched that. I don't think I did. Amazing performance. Didn't break off of the chain too far, but every now and then you're reminded, kind of like Killing Mary Sue. Many people who just want a product, and they want a clean product, and they want CGI, and then the CGI shows something that started out as a very nebulous, mercurial, abstract notion that is something you couldn't quite make out, but you wanted to give the impression of this isn't substantiated through the proper normative solution of what human vetting is thought to be in our current modern idea of modernity, right? And that is, like, there was one scene where I can't remember exactly who did it or what. You'll have to watch it. I'll probably have to go through that and really it was really late. But there was this point where one of the characters stepped on the skull of this recently deceased person, and it squashed like a pumpkin, right? So that showed you the entire process was where we might have seen things more euphemistically and we were taking it all too seriously, and it honed us back into this nebulous reality that, look, this is what a cowboy might have dreamt on the trail, or what somebody aberrantly had a dream about, picking up a transmission from someone who didn't know how to fully state how they felt at the time. But the moment that the memory had agency and it traveled through time, it became a part of space, so that in a certain time of its own recollection, it could come into itself, right? So in this, you see that memories themselves have agency, and that to recruit a particular moniker and say, this is a name, this is a title, this is when this was born. You see how you have now done a certain type of mancy, spellbinding, a craft that has now forced that entity, right, into a state where it is seen as a reflection of a time, a people, a place, an era. It's no longer, we are no longer this floating abstract idea of unlimited potential. Now that there is an observation and a judgment placed on us, we can't just be whatever we want to be. Now we have to refract if we're going to live in the environmental solution and we're forced into it. So a lot of these movies, when I cited, Killing Mary Sue, like there's a point where you might go, this is a ridiculous movie, where she says, she's about to kill the senator who is her father-in-law, and who she had to capitulate all her higher level thinking and uniformly come to terms of, this is God, this is as good as it gets, this is my dad. And then he's the one who commissions her death, right? Because she's so embarrassing. But then she also, a big reason why she's embarrassing is because she's like this unkillable secret agent who was then, unbeknownst to everyone else, trained by this Russian government for their own selfish claims and uses. But because she was so off track, like she wasn't on any sort of syllogistic track under the aim or the causal set of becoming anything in the world, right? That her mind would find a way to use those skills, those newly acquired traits, and go into her subconscious and make her an even more powerful mercenary or killer. But not a mercenary in the sense that she wasn't out to kill. She was trained as a mercenary, right? Type of a figure through like this MK Ultra type shit, right? But she wasn't going to use the skills for selfish pursuits or selfish gains, right? So what ends up happening is her subconscious is just able to intrinsically know exactly where to be at a particular time to move and evade, getting shot or hit, and to be able to do like multiple reactions at the same time, right? And she ends up like shooting upward and going, I killed God. And she goes like this, to paraphrase, and this really ridiculous figure of God gets shot, this fat guy in this sort of, I don't know, this like white Grecian garb with like one of these sort of, what was it, Bacchus? This sort of draped grape wreath around his head, falls from who knows where, from the ceiling, and falls and dies. So she kills God, and many people would go, oh, this is the dumbest. Like, what is this, like a preschool stage play or something like that, right? But when you're honed back into this, these parables, this storytelling of oral tradition, you have to think more so, and this is how people should have always thought when they're watching a movie, because it really is storytelling, in the way that once you break from these constructs and these falsified structures, that you get into the idea of, if I could tell any story unbound, as to if I could imagine the perfect world, say, right? I did post something up about that here on Community Post a little earlier, where I woke up thinking about this, right? Where to me, the perfect world really would be, there is no form involved. There isn't virgins and a takeover and the perpetuation of a carnal, corporeal, organic waste and rot, right? For me, it's getting away from sexualization entirely, or the copulation process, where that is no longer a determinate factor or an aspect of us or the intelligence, and that we are uniformly not bound to a symmetry, but in this sort of Burkhardt-Heim type of a solution, right? It really is coming down to principles, and the fact that now that we understand that, right, we realize ourselves in the solution as not separate, deviant, divisionary aspects, disparate aspects of the whole, but we now see that everything is familiar, everything is kinetically connected, but in a way that we don't have to become the totality of intelligence or try to reduce the teleology or the causal set. In fact, there is no highest form, because there is always this, however much time it takes is however much time it takes for this maturation and this alchemical mixture to ripen and mature. And that here we don't see rot or anything going to waste, color, texture, smell, this abstract idea of feelings, intuition, nothing is separate. There's a sort of inference that synesthesia is not something that is anomalous, but is in fact the sort of precursor or abecedary groundwork to what I'm talking about, right? So you really get into the fact that we couldn't really imagine what true egalitarianism and true democracy even looks at, right? Or looks like. So anyway, I don't want to banter on for no reason, but I just wanted to get a few of those thoughts out there. Because when we try to solidify things and make statements into law, you do understand Black's Law Dictionary, and you do understand that this argument and this conjecture about witchcraft is really the argument and conjecture not specifically about witchcraft. It's only taking that as what I was just discussing, it's putting into form a traditional state or statement of this is what this is, where in fact from the existential to point at a form of mindcraft or spiritual warfare or witchcraft, you then have to describe exactly what that is. And once you describe what it is, you are now held under the contention of you are trying to mislead a people. And then the natural excuse would be, oh, well, the people wouldn't understand this. And then the natural conclusion would be, why bring it up at all? And it is, well, people demanded it. And then the refraction, the rebuttal would be, they only demanded it because you introduced the idea, right? So it gets into this wishy-washy category where people then, their votes, right, determine what they believe in. And that's not even true, because that's held under a contention of a uniformal solidified legal action where everything has its place, its status, its persona, its tradition, its norm. This goes over here, everything's compartmentalized, right? And that's not how anything works. So when you get into this and you see that remote viewing is witchcraft, right? If you want to talk about witchcraft, you're just talking about the participant. When you're talking about the participant, you're talking about the introduction of sexuality. Why say it's witchcraft, and why say warlocks follow the coursology of witchcraft? When you get into it, you're saying this is feminine craft. This is when a woman thinks ontologically, and like Kevin with E. Akers, he just put this thing up where a few days ago where he's talking about this publication where it's becoming popular to write about how, and the author is writing about how she would rather literally have sexual copulation with beasts than boys, right? And the whole thing about boys, that's pretty freaky in itself, right? So in other words, she wants to have control, but she wants to get off on the idea and the temporal, carnal base feelings, right? Instead of breaking free from these confines, right? She wants to stay in it. So in essence, that is witchcraft. It's accepting in a certain stoicism. It's accepting things as they are, but then breaking completely away from the traditions of this is how your world works. This is the causal set. these are the main elements and the main ingredients and the main physics of how your world works, right? And it's saying, no, I demand to have everything in a solidified carnal state, but I demand that they also stay fluid in a form of nebulous plasma at the same time. It doesn't work like that, right? So in the inner workings of witchcraft, there is this machinating aspect too, all the time, that people don't know what's going on in my head. I'm plotting and planning and thinking that whatever anybody says, unless they're in total agreement and compliance with me, that they are my enemy, and I will perform this deceitful implementation of thought and emotion and passion and anything else that I can discover in the outside world that can provide me what I want to be solidified as a unitized measure of my own actionable abuse, right? I must be in control. So you are naming yourself as God when you do witchcraft. You are naming yourself, you're saying, I'm reducing myself, I accept this place. But then in another sense, you're saying deceitfully, while I was accepting that position of that proximal location, this is me, this is who I am, I'm refuting it at the same time, and I'm trying to expand to the very doors of heaven and break it down and trick God so that I can kill him, right? So there's this idea, this anger, but also this ridiculous notion that you somehow have done what nobody else could do. You have broken through the moral constraints and walls of tradition, and you have now entered into a realm that nobody has been. How many people have thought that, right? So when our highest forms, and we realize there is no highest form, but there's an ever striving, right? Go into the work of perfecting and evolving, not just a conceptualization, right? But creating something that's symbiotically harmonious, right? And breeding life, where when we eat, nothing is killed, nothing is consumed. In fact, the excrement isn't excrement at all. It actually breeds more life and germinates life, right? And then you get into the refraction of that, which would be, and then you wouldn't be able to control it. Then you wouldn't know what comes where. And it's a trust to the ontology. And so the final statement in summary is that we can't trust the ontology because the ontology cannot trust us.